Hey everyone! Tonight we're exploring one of history's most profound paradoxes, how nomadic societies that prized freedom of movement developed sophisticated systems of human bondage. Before we settle in, take a moment to like this if you enjoy these deep historical explorations, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I always find it fascinating how our global community gathers to explore these complex questions together. Now get comfortable, dim those lights. Tonight we're not chasing dramatic battles or heroic conquests. Instead, we're going to examine something much quieter but equally important: the economic logic that drove nomadic slave systems across the vast Eurasian steppes. Let's begin our gentle journey into this intricate web of survival, adaptation, and human complexity. Picture, if you will, dawn breaking over endless grasslands. The soft rhythm of hoofbeats mingles with the gentle jingling of harnesses as herders move with their flocks across landscapes that stretch beyond the horizon. In these peaceful morning scenes lies a profound contradiction that shaped centuries of human history. Societies that valued mobility above all else, yet developed some of the most sophisticated systems of human ownership the world has ever known. Tonight, we'll explore how environmental constraints created unique economic solutions, how the harsh realities of steppe life drove complex social arrangements, and how these seemingly contradictory systems actually created unexpected stability and cultural exchange across vast distances. We'll examine the quiet evolution of trade networks that connected distant civilizations, the careful economic calculations that governed nomadic decision-making, and the gradual transformation of simple raiding into systematic economic integration. From the Scythian confederations of the 7th century BC to the Mongol Empire's commercial innovations, we'll trace the development of economic systems that balanced human freedom with human bondage, mobility with control, and survival with moral complexity. This is a story of adaptation, necessity, and the endless human capacity to create order from chaos, even in the most challenging environments our species has ever inhabited. In the vast expanse of the Eurasian steppes, where endless grasslands stretch beyond the horizon like a green ocean frozen in time, the gentle rhythm of hoofbeats has echoed across millennia. Here, beneath skies so immense they seem to swallow the earth itself, nomadic peoples developed economic systems of remarkable complexity and troubling contradictions. The morning mist rises slowly from the grass, revealing scattered herds of horses and sheep moving with their human guardians across landscapes that have remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. The environmental realities of steppe life created unique economic pressures that shaped human relationships in ways both profound and paradoxical. These were societies built around the fundamental principle of mobility, where the ability to move freely across vast distances meant survival itself. Yet within this culture of movement, systems of human bondage emerged that would define nomadic economics for over a millennium. The soft jingling of harnesses and the quiet conversations of herders moving with their flocks masked the complex social arrangements that made such mobility possible. The harsh beauty of the steppes demanded constant adaptation. Winters brought bitter cold that could freeze rivers solid and bury grasslands under snow for months. Summers scorched the earth with heat that could kill both animals and humans caught without shelter. Between these extremes, brief springs and autumns offered windows of opportunity for movement, trade, and the careful management of resources that meant the difference between prosperity and starvation. In such an environment, every decision carried weight, every resource had value, and human labor became perhaps the most precious commodity of all. The Scythians, those early masters of the western steppes, understood this reality with the clarity that comes from generations of survival on the margins of the possible. Archaeological evidence from their burial mounds reveals not just the golden treasures that have captured popular imagination, but the quieter story of how they organized their society around the careful management of both animal and human resources. Their felt-covered wagons, pulled by oxen across the grasslands, carried not just families and possessions, but complex social hierarchies that included various forms of human bondage integrated seamlessly into nomadic life. The economic logic of nomadic slavery emerged from practical necessities rather than abstract theories of human ownership. During the intense activity of seasonal migrations, when entire communities moved with their herds across hundreds of miles, the coordination required was staggering. Sheep needed constant tending, horses required skilled care, and the complex process of setting up and breaking down camps demanded specialized knowledge and reliable labor. Free members of nomadic society focused on the skilled tasks of herding, warfare, and trade, while captives and slaves provided the steady labor that kept communities functioning during these critical periods. The gentle sound of felt being worked by skilled hands around evening campfires tells part of this story. The production of felt, that remarkable material that provided shelter, clothing, and countless other necessities of steppe life, required intensive labor and considerable skill. Women, both free and enslaved, worked together in the quiet after the day's travel, their hands moving in practiced rhythms as they transformed raw wool into the fabric of nomadic civilization. These scenes of peaceful cooperation masked the complex social relationships that made such activity possible. The integration of slave labor into nomadic society created unique challenges unknown to sedentary civilizations. Unlike agricultural societies where slaves could be confined to specific locations and tasks, nomadic slavery required systems of control that could function during constant movement. The solution lay not in physical restraint, but in psychological and social bonds that made escape both difficult and often undesirable. Captives, particularly those taken as children, were gradually integrated into nomadic society through a process that combined practical necessity with cultural adaptation. The seasonal rhythms of steppe life created distinct patterns of labor demand that shaped how nomadic societies organized their human resources. Spring brought the intensive work of birthing season, when skilled attendants were needed to help mares foal and use lamb. Summer required the constant vigilance of herding, moving animals to fresh pastures while avoiding the territories of rival groups. Autumn brought the crucial work of preparation for winter, when every member of society, free and enslaved alike, participated in the complex tasks of preserving food, preparing shelters, and organizing resources for the long months ahead. The quiet efficiency of these seasonal cycles reflected generations of accumulated wisdom about survival in one of Earth's most challenging environments. The knowledge of which grasses provided the best nutrition at different times of year, how to read weather patterns in the endless sky, and how to maintain the delicate balance between human needs and animal welfare represented a form of collective intelligence that transcended individual ownership. Yet within this cooperative framework, the labor of enslaved individuals provided the foundation that made nomadic prosperity possible. The gentle morning light revealed the intricate organization that allowed nomadic societies to maintain human bondage while constantly moving across vast landscapes. Within these mobile communities, the mechanics of slave systems had evolved into surprisingly sophisticated arrangements that balanced practical necessity with the fundamental challenge of controlling people who could potentially disappear into the endless steppes. The Xiongnu Confederation, flourishing between the 3rd century BCE and 1st century CE, developed perhaps the most nuanced approach to integrating captives into their mobile society. Archaeological evidence from burial sites across Mongolia suggests that enslaved individuals were gradually incorporated into family units rather than maintained as separate, easily identifiable groups. This integration served multiple purposes. It reduced The likelihood of organized resistance provided essential skills that nomadic groups often lacked and created bonds of mutual dependence that made escape less attractive. The daily rhythm of nomadic life naturally accommodated this integration process. As herders moved their animals to fresh pastures, captives worked alongside free members of the community, tending livestock, processing animal products, and maintaining the complex equipment necessary for mobile life. The soft sounds of felt being worked by skilled hands, the quiet efficiency of cheese making, and the gentle conversations around evening fires created an environment where social boundaries, while present, were often fluid and permeable. Specialized roles emerged within these mobile slave systems that reflected both economic necessity and cultural adaptation. Skilled craftspeople, particularly those who could work with metals or create the intricate textiles prized by nomadic societies, often found themselves in positions of relative privilege. Their expertise made them valuable assets who were more likely to be treated well and gradually integrated into the community. The archaeological record from Scythian sites reveals workshops where enslaved artisans created elaborate goldwork and intricate textiles, their skills preserved and transmitted across generations. The Turkic Khaganates of the 6th through 8th centuries refined these integration strategies further, developing what scholars describe as a graduated bondage system. New captives began with the most restricted status, closely supervised and assigned most basic tasks. Over time, those who demonstrated loyalty and useful skills could advance through various levels of integration, eventually achieving something approaching free status within the community. This system created incentives for cooperation while maintaining the economic benefits of forced labor. Women within these systems often experience different trajectories than men, frequently becoming integrated through marriage arrangements that serve both social and economic functions. The gentle negotiations that surrounded these unions, conducted around evening fires with the soft sounds of livestock settling for the night, created new kinship networks that strengthened the overall community structure. Children born from these unions occupied ambiguous positions, neither fully free or enslaved. Their status often determined by their usefulness to the community and their acceptance of nomadic cultural values. The seasonal patterns of nomadic life created natural rhythms for slave management that differed markedly from sedentary systems. During the harsh winter months, when communities remained relatively stationary, enslaved individuals worked on indoor tasks like textile production, tool maintenance, and food preparation. The close quarters of winter camps fostered relationships and cultural exchange that would have been impossible in more rigid systems. Spring migrations brought opportunities for escape, but also chances for enslaved individuals to demonstrate their value through specialized knowledge of routes, weather patterns, or animal behavior. The Mongol Empire's innovations in slave management reflected both the scale of their conquests and their pragmatic approach to governance. Rather than simply incorporating captives into existing tribal structures, the Mongols developed specialized administrative units that could efficiently process and redistribute human resources across their vast territories. Skilled administrators, often drawn from conquered populations, managed these systems with a bureaucratic efficiency that rivaled contemporary Chinese or Islamic administrative practices. The psychological dimensions of nomadic slavery created unique challenges and opportunities. The constant movement that defined nomadic life meant that enslaved individuals were regularly exposed to new environments, peoples, and possibilities. This exposure could reinforce feelings of displacement and loss, but it also provided opportunities for cultural learning and adaptation that might eventually lead to integration. The gentle conversations that occurred during long migrations, the shared experiences of weather and hardship, and the mutual dependence required for survival in harsh environments all contributed to complex relationships that transcended simple master-slave dynamics. Trade relationships with sedentary civilizations influenced how nomadic societies managed their slave populations, creating pressures for standardization and efficiency that gradually transformed traditional practices. The quiet negotiations that occurred at trading posts along the Silk Road, where nomadic leaders exchanged human captives for manufactured goods, required systems for evaluating, transporting, and maintaining enslaved individuals that became increasingly sophisticated over time. The transformation of nomadic warfare from spontaneous raiding into systematic economic enterprise unfolded gradually across the vast steppes, like the slow seasonal changes that governed pastoral life itself. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the air carried the soft sounds of horses stirring and the gentle rustle of felt tent walls, nomadic leaders would gather around dying embers to discuss not just immediate survival, but the careful orchestration of what would become sophisticated war economies. The economic logic underlying organized raiding emerged from the fundamental constraints of steppe life. Unlike agricultural societies with their predictable harvests and stored surpluses, nomadic communities faced the constant challenge of resource scarcity punctuated by seasonal abundance. The Xiongnu Confederation, flourishing along China's northern borders from the 3rd century BCE, developed perhaps the most refined approach to this challenge. Their systematic raids were not chaotic outbursts of violence, but carefully planned economic ventures that operated on principles as methodical as any merchant's trade calculations. Archaeological evidence from Xiongnu burial sites reveals the quiet sophistication of their planning processes. Bronze plaques depicting hunting scenes actually information about optimal timing for raids, while the distribution of luxury goods across different burial sites suggests a complex system of resource allocation based on military contributions. The peaceful morning rituals of Xiongnu camps included not just the tending of animals, but the careful maintenance of weapons and the quiet transmission of tactical knowledge from experienced warriors to younger members of the Confederation. The development of sustainable raiding practices required nomadic societies to balance immediate gains against long-term relationships with their targets. The Turkic Khaganates of the 6th through 8th centuries CE perfected this delicate equilibrium, creating what might be called a harvest economy approach to warfare. Like careful farmers who understood the importance of not depleting their fields, Turkic leaders developed sophisticated strategies for managing their relationships with sedentary neighbors. They would raid settlements just enough to maintain their own economic needs, while ensuring these communities remained viable for future interactions. This systematic approach transformed the very nature of nomadic military organization. Rather than the spontaneous war bands of earlier periods, mature nomadic societies developed specialized military units with distinct economic functions. Some groups focused on rapid acquisition of livestock and portable goods, while others specialized in the capture of skilled craftspeople whose knowledge could benefit the entire Confederation. The gentle efficiency of these operations reflected centuries of accumulated wisdom about the most effective ways to integrate warfare into broader economic systems. The seasonal rhythms of nomadic life created natural patterns for military economic activity. Spring raids often targeted the agricultural implements and seed stores of farming communities, while summer expeditions focused on livestock and trade goods. Autumn campaigns aimed at capturing skilled workers who could contribute to winter craft production, and winter itself became a time for processing captives and planning future operations. This cyclical approach created a predictable economic foundation that allowed nomadic societies to develop increasingly sophisticated social institutions. The integration of warfare into nomadic economic systems also required careful attention to diplomatic relationships. The Mongol Empire's early expansion provides perhaps the most striking example of how systematic raiding could evolve into complex international relations. Mongol leaders understood that purely destructive warfare would ultimately undermine their own economic interests, leading them to develop nuanced approaches that combined military pressure with diplomatic negotiation and economic incentives. The quiet efficiency of mature nomadic war economies can be seen in their sophisticated intelligence networks. Nomadic societies developed extensive systems for gathering information about potential targets, including detailed knowledge of seasonal patterns, defensive capabilities, and economic resources. These intelligence operations often involved peaceful traders and travelers who could move freely between nomadic and sedentary communities, creating a web of information that supported both military and commercial activities. The environmental pressures that shaped nomadic war economies also influenced their technological development. The need for mobility required innovations in portable weapons, communication systems, and logistical support. The famous composite bows of steppe warriors represented not just military technology, but economic tools that could be manufactured using materials available in nomadic environments, while providing maximum effectiveness with minimal weight and maintenance requirements. The gradual institutionalization of military economics created new forms of social organization within nomadic societies. Military leaders developed specialized roles that combined traditional warrior functions with economic planning and diplomatic negotiation. The peaceful transmission of these complex skills required sophisticated educational systems that could operate within the constraints of mobile societies, leading to the development of oral traditions that preserved both tactical knowledge and economic wisdom across generations. This systematic approach to warfare and economics ultimately created forms of stability that contradicted common assumptions about nomadic societies. Rather than representing chaos and destruction, mature nomadic war economies provided predictable economic foundations that supported complex cultural achievements and sophisticated international relationships, demonstrating the quiet wisdom of human adaptation to challenging environments. The development of trade networks centered on human commerce represented one of the most sophisticated economic achievements of nomadic civilizations, creating connections that spanned continents and endured for centuries. These networks emerged gradually, like rivers carving their paths across the landscape, following natural routes that connected distant markets with the steady rhythm of seasonal migration. The gentle jingling of caravan bells and the soft shuffling of feet across ancient paths marked the movement of goods and people through a system that balanced economic necessity with remarkable organizational complexity. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the steppes lay shrouded in morning mist, traders would prepare their caravans with the methodical care of those who understood that success depended on attention to countless small details. The human merchandise formed an integral part of these trading expeditions, not as an afterthought but as a carefully managed component of broader commercial enterprises. Skilled craftspeople, agricultural workers, and domestic servants moved alongside silk, spices, and precious metals, their diverse talents representing different forms of valuable cargo that would find eager markets in distant lands. The Silk Road networks provided the most extensive example of how nomadic societies integrated human commerce with other trade goods. Along these ancient routes, specialized trading posts developed where different forms of merchandise could be evaluated, exchanged, and prepared for onward journey. These markets operated with quiet efficiency, their success depending on the maintenance of trust and reputation across vast distances and diverse cultures. The peaceful bustle of these commercial centers reflected centuries of gradual development, where practices evolved to accommodate the needs of traders from many different backgrounds. Nomadic traders developed sophisticated methods for managing their human cargo during long journeys across challenging terrain. The integration of captives into caravan life required careful attention to health, security, and productivity, creating systems that balanced control with the practical necessities of travel. Experienced traders understood that their success depended on delivering healthy, skilled workers to their destinations leading to practices that emphasize preservation rather than exploitation. The gentle rhythm of caravan life provided structure and routine, with established patterns for rest, meals, and movement that acknowledged the human needs of all participants. The relationship between nomadic societies and settled civilizations created complex networks of intermediaries who specialized in facilitating these exchanges. These middlemen, often drawn from border communities that understood both nomadic and sedentary cultures, played crucial roles in negotiating prices, arranging transportation, and ensuring the smooth flow of commerce. Their quiet diplomacy and cultural knowledge made possible the sustained commercial relationships that characterize these trading networks. The peaceful resolution of disputes and the maintenance of commercial agreements across cultural boundaries demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of economic relationships that these societies developed. Different regions developed their own variations of these trading systems, reflecting local conditions and cultural preferences. The Crimean Khanate's commercial networks, for instance, created connections between the Black Sea region and Mediterranean markets, while Central Asian routes linked Chinese and Persian commercial centers. Each system reflected the particular geographic and cultural circumstances of its region, yet all shared common features that enabled them to function as parts of larger, interconnected networks. The gentle adaptation of trading practices to local conditions demonstrated the flexibility and responsiveness that characterized successful nomadic commerce. The economic logic underlying these networks extended beyond simple profit maximization to encompass broader considerations of political stability and cultural exchange. Nomadic societies recognized that sustainable trading relationships required the maintenance of peaceful conditions along trade routes, leading to diplomatic arrangements and protection agreements that supported commercial activity. The quiet negotiations that established these agreements often involved complex considerations of tribute, protection, and mutual benefit, creating frameworks that enabled commerce to flourish across political boundaries. Religious and cultural considerations also influenced the development of these trading networks, with different communities developing their own approaches to the ethical questions raised by human commerce. Some groups emphasize the integration and eventual assimilation of traded individuals, while others maintained clearer distinctions between different categories of people. These variations reflected deeper cultural values and religious beliefs, creating diverse approaches to similar economic challenges. The peaceful coexistence of different trading practices within broader networks demonstrated the tolerance and adaptability that characterized successful commercial relationships. The technological innovations that supported these trading networks included developments in transportation, communication, and record-keeping that enabled the coordination of complex commercial operations across vast distances. The gradual improvement of caravan equipment, the development of standardized weights and measures, and the creation of credit systems all contributed to the efficiency and reliability of these networks. These quiet innovations, often overlooked in dramatic historical accounts, represented the accumulated wisdom of generations of traders who understood that success depended on solving practical problems through careful observation and gradual improvement. The decline of these traditional trading networks reflected broader changes in political organization, transportation technology, and economic systems that gradually reduced the advantages of nomadic commercial practices. The peaceful transformation of these ancient systems into modern forms of commerce demonstrated a continuing human capacity for adaptation and innovation, while preserving valuable lessons about the importance of trust, reputation, and cultural understanding in successful commercial relationships. The gentle integration of diverse peoples into nomadic societies reveals one of history's most fascinating paradoxes: how communities built on freedom of movement developed sophisticated systems for incorporating those who began as captives. Across the vast steppes, from the Scythian heartlands to the Mongol territories, nomadic civilizations created remarkably adaptive social structures that transformed outsiders into integral community members through processes both gradual and profound. The morning light filtering through felt tent walls often illuminated scenes of remarkable cultural synthesis. In a typical nomadic camp, one might observe skilled artisans from distant agricultural civilizations working alongside hereditary herders, their different techniques and traditions slowly blending into new forms of craftsmanship. The soft sounds of various languages mingled in the dawn air, as people from different backgrounds collaborated in the daily tasks of nomadic life. These peaceful interactions represented generations of careful social engineering, where nomadic societies developed increasingly sophisticated methods for transforming captives into valued community members. The Xiongnu Confederation, flourishing across the Mongolian steppes from the 3rd century BCE, exemplified this integrative approach through their carefully structured social hierarchy. Archaeological evidence from their burial sites reveals a society where individuals of clearly diverse ethnic origins achieved positions of considerable status and responsibility. The quiet efficiency of their system lay not in forced assimilation, but in creating pathways for advancement that rewarded skill and loyalty regardless of origin. Skilled metalworkers captured from Chinese territories found themselves elevated to positions of influence, their expertise in bronze and iron working becoming essential to nomadic military and economic success. The process of integration typically began with a period of careful observation and gradual trust building. New arrivals would be assigned to established families or clans, where they learned the rhythms of nomadic life while contributing their own specialized knowledge. The gentle pace of this transformation allowed for the preservation of valuable skills, while ensuring loyalty to the new community. Chinese chroniclers noted with surprise how quickly their captured countrymen seemed to adapt to nomadic ways, often becoming fierce defenders of their new societies within a generation. Gender played a crucial role in these integration processes, with women often serving as cultural bridges between different groups. Nomadic societies, recognizing the importance of maintaining genetic and cultural diversity, developed sophisticated marriage practices that incorporated women from various backgrounds into their kinship networks. These unions created lasting bonds between communities and facilitated the peaceful transmission of knowledge, skills, and cultural practices. The quiet influence of these women in maintaining cultural memory while adapting to new circumstances cannot be overstated. The Turkic Khaganates of the 6th through 8th centuries refined these integration techniques further, developing what might be considered the most sophisticated nomadic assimilation system in history. Their approach emphasized the gradual elevation of talented individuals through merit-based advancement, regardless of their origins. The peaceful coexistence of shamanic traditions with Buddhist, Christian, and Islamic influences within their territories demonstrates the remarkable cultural flexibility these societies achieved. Archaeological findings from Turkic sites reveal burial practices that honor diverse religious traditions while maintaining distinctly nomadic characteristics. Children born into these integrated communities often became the most effective cultural synthesizers, naturally combining elements from different traditions into new forms of expression. The gentle transmission of multiple languages, religious practices, and technical skills created generations of individuals who served as living bridges between different civilizations. These cultural mediators proved invaluable in diplomatic and commercial relationships, their multilingual abilities and cultural sensitivity facilitating peaceful interactions across vast distances. The economic dimensions of this integration process were equally sophisticated. Nomadic societies recognized that forced labor was far less efficient than willing to the development of systems that gradually transformed captives into stakeholders in community success. The quiet wisdom of this approach lay in creating economic incentives for loyalty and innovation. Skilled craftspeople found their expertise highly valued, while those with agricultural knowledge helped nomadic communities develop more sophisticated relationships with settled populations. Religious and spiritual integration presented unique challenges and opportunities. Nomadic societies, typically characterized by flexible shamanic traditions, proved remarkably adept at incorporating diverse spiritual practices without losing their essential character. The peaceful coexistence of different religious traditions within nomadic communities created rich spiritual environments where individuals could maintain connections to their ancestral beliefs while participating fully in their new social context. This religious tolerance, born of practical necessity, often surpassed that found in more rigid settled civilizations. The gradual transformation of social identity within these communities reveals the fluid nature of nomadic civilization itself. Over time, the distinction between original tribe members and integrated populations became increasingly meaningless, as shared experiences and common challenges created new forms of collective identity. The gentle evolution of these societies demonstrates how nomadic communities maintained their essential character while continuously adapting to incorporate new influences and capabilities. This remarkable capacity for cultural synthesis ultimately became one of the great strengths of nomadic civilization, enabling these societies to serve as conduits for knowledge, technology, and cultural exchange across vast distances. The peaceful integration of diverse populations created communities uniquely equipped to navigate the complex relationships between different civilized them to understand and communicate effectively across cultural boundaries. The quiet contemplation of nomadic leaders around evening fires reveals one of history's most profound paradoxes: societies that celebrated freedom of movement while simultaneously developing sophisticated systems of human bondage. As twilight settled over the vast steppes, these thoughtful deliberations exposed the deep contradictions that lay at the heart of nomadic civilization, where economic necessity often clashed with cultural values in ways that defy simple moral judgment. The fundamental tension emerged from the very nature of nomadic existence itself. These societies, which prized mobility and independence above all else, found themselves creating elaborate mechanisms of control and ownership that seemed to contradict their core values. The gentle evening conversations of tribal elders often returned to this central paradox: how could people who viewed freedom as their birthright simultaneously engage in the systematic enslavement of others? The answer lay not in moral blindness, but in the complex economic realities that shaped survival on the steppes. Archaeological evidence from Scythian burial sites reveals the careful consideration given to these moral complexities. Elaborate grave goods buried alongside both free and enslaved individuals suggest a society grappling with questions of human worth and dignity. The quiet dignity preserved in these ancient tombs speaks to a civilization that, despite its participation in slave systems, maintained complex understandings of human value that transcended simple economic calculations. The economic efficiency of nomadic slave systems created its own moral burden. Leaders understood that their sophisticated networks of human commerce enabled the survival and prosperity of their people, yet they also recognized the profound human cost of these arrangements. Written accounts from Chinese observers describe nomadic rulers who spoke with evident discomfort about the necessity of maintaining slave populations, their words revealing the weight of decisions that prioritized collective survival over individual freedom. Religious and philosophical frameworks within nomadic societies reflected these tensions in subtle but significant ways. Tengrist beliefs, which emphasized the interdependence of all living beings, existed alongside practices that treated certain humans as property. The gentle wisdom of shamanic traditions often addressed these contradictions through complex spiritual narratives that acknowledged both the necessity of current practices and the hope for eventual transformation. The gradual evolution of nomadic attitudes towards slavery reveals a civilization slowly working through its moral contradictions. Early Turkic legal codes show increasing attention to the rights and protections of enslaved individuals. suggesting societies that were actively wrestling with the ethical implications of their economic systems. These legal developments, recorded in careful detail on stone monuments across the steppes, demonstrate the quiet persistence of moral reasoning within seemingly harsh economic realities. The tension between mobility and control created practical challenges that forced nomadic societies to confront their contradictions daily. The logistics of moving large populations of both free and individuals across vast distances required constant negotiation between competing values. Oral traditions preserve stories of leaders who struggled with these decisions, their narratives revealing the human face of systematic moral complexity. Gender dynamics within nomadic slave systems added another layer of contradiction to these societies. Women who held positions of considerable authority within nomadic hierarchies simultaneously oversaw systems that enslaved other women. The quiet dignity of these female leaders, preserved in artistic representations and burial practices, suggests individuals who navigated these contradictions with careful attention to both practical necessity and moral consideration. The sustainability of nomadic slave systems became increasingly questionable as these societies matured and expanded. The environmental limitations of the steppes meant that indefinite growth in slave populations was impossible, forcing leaders to consider alternative economic strategies. The peaceful transition toward different forms of labor organization in later periods reflects the gradual resolution of these fundamental contradictions through practical adaptation rather than moral revolution. Contemporary scholarly understanding of these paradoxes emphasizes the importance of viewing historical practices within their proper contexts while still acknowledging their human costs. The quiet wisdom that emerges from this balanced perspective allows us to appreciate both the economic sophistication of nomadic societies and the profound moral questions their practices raise for our understanding of human civilization. The transformation of nomadic slave systems unfolded like the gentle changing of seasons across a process so gradual that those living through it might scarcely have noticed the profound shifts occurring beneath the surface of daily life. As the 14th century drew to a close, the great nomadic confederations that had dominated Eurasian trade routes for over a millennium began to encounter forces that would fundamentally alter their economic foundations, not through dramatic conquest or sudden collapse, but through the quiet accumulation of technological, environmental, and political changes that made their traditional systems increasingly difficult to maintain. The rise of gunpowder technology represented perhaps the most significant challenge to nomadic military advantages, though its impact manifested slowly and unevenly across the steppes. Where once the mobility and archery skills of nomadic warriors had provided decisive advantages over sedentary armies, the development of firearms and artillery gradually shifted the balance of power toward settled civilizations with the resources and infrastructure to support these new weapons. Yet this transformation occurred over generations, allowing nomadic societies time to adapt their strategies and economic systems to changing circumstances. Many groups began to incorporate firearms into their military practices, while others focused on developing new forms of economic specialization that could complement or replace their traditional reliance on raiding and slave-taking. Environmental changes also played a crucial role in reshaping nomadic economies, though these shifts occurred on timescales that made them nearly invisible to contemporary observers. The gradual cooling of the climate during the Little Ice Age affected grazing patterns and reduced the carrying capacity of many steppe regions, forcing nomadic groups to develop more intensive management strategies for their herds and human resources. This environmental pressure encouraged the development of more settled forms of pastoralism and reduced the viability of the extensive raiding expeditions that had traditionally supplied slave populations. The quiet adaptation to these changing conditions demonstrated the remarkable flexibility of nomadic societies, even as it transformed the fundamental nature of their economic systems. The consolidation of centralized states along the periphery of the steppes created new political realities that gradually constrained nomadic autonomy. The Ming dynasty's systematic approach to border defense, the Ottoman Empire's expansion into the Black Sea region, and the growth of Russian power in the north all contributed to a gradual reduction in the spaces where traditional nomadic economies could operate freely. These states developed sophisticated strategies for managing nomadic populations, often incorporating them into their own military and administrative systems, while simultaneously working to eliminate the autonomous raiding that had long characterized steppe societies. The process was rarely violent or dramatic, more often involving the gradual extension of state authority through the establishment of trading posts, the negotiation of tribute relationships, and the co-optation of nomadic elites into imperial hierarchies. The transformation of trade routes also contributed to the decline of traditional nomadic slave systems, though this change occurred so gradually that its full impact became apparent only over centuries. The development of maritime trading networks reduced the relative importance of overland routes that nomadic groups had long controlled, while the growth of alternative land routes through more settled regions provided merchants with avoided the uncertainties of dealing with nomadic confederations. The economic foundations that had supported nomadic slave trading began to erode as demand shifted and new suppliers emerged in different regions. This transformation was neither sudden nor complete, but it gradually reduced the economic incentives that had sustained nomadic slave systems for centuries. Religious and cultural changes within nomadic societies themselves also played a role in transforming attitudes towards slavery and warfare. The spread of Islam among many Turkic and Mongol groups brought new ethical frameworks that, while not prohibiting slavery entirely, encouraged different approaches to the treatment of captives and the conduct of warfare. Buddhist and Christian influences in other regions similarly contributed to evolving perspectives on human bondage and the moral dimensions of economic systems. These religious transformations occurred through the quiet work of missionaries, traders, and cultural intermediaries rather than through dramatic conversions and practices that accumulated over generations. The integration of nomadic populations into emerging state systems often involved the transformation of traditional slave relationships into new forms of social organization. Former slaves might become settled agricultural workers, military colonists, or urban craftsmen, while their former masters adapted to new roles as landowners, military officers, or government officials. This process of social transformation was rarely smooth or complete, but it represented a fundamental shift away from the mobile, slavery-based economies that had characterized nomadic societies for centuries. The quiet negotiation of these new relationships required considerable skill and adaptation from all parties involved, demonstrating the remarkable human capacity for peaceful change even in the face of profound economic transformation. As traditional nomadic slave systems declined, many groups developed alternative economic strategies that drew upon their accumulated knowledge and skills while adapting to new circumstances. Some became specialized in long-distance trade, using their understanding of routes and markets to serve as intermediaries between different regions. Others focused on animal husbandry and the production of pastoral products for growing urban markets. Still others integrated into the military systems of expanding empires, where their traditional skills in mobility and warfare remained valuable even as the broader economic context changed. These adaptations demonstrated the continued vitality of nomadic cultures even as their traditional economic foundations transformed. The peaceful evolution of nomadic societies from slavery-based economies to new forms of organization reflected both the pressures of changing circumstances and the inherent adaptability of human communities. The process was neither uniform nor complete, with different groups responding to similar challenges in diverse ways based on their particular circumstances, cultural traditions, and available opportunities. Yet across the vast expanse of the Eurasian steppes, the gradual transformation of nomadic slave systems represented one of the most significant economic changes of the late medieval period, marking the end of an era while opening new possibilities for human development and cultural exchange. As we draw our contemplative journey through the nomadic steppes to its gentle close, let us rest in the profound understanding we have gained of these complex human societies. The paradoxes we have explored: freedom paired with bondage, mobility intertwined with control, survival necessities creating moral complexities, reveal the intricate tapestry of human adaptation across the vast grasslands of Eurasia. The economic systems we have witnessed evolve not from cruelty, but from the quiet desperation of survival in harsh environments. The nomadic peoples, moving with their herds beneath endless skies, developed institutions that balanced immediate needs with long-term sustainability. Their slave systems, however troubling to modern sensibilities, emerged from the same human ingenuity that created their remarkable mobility, their sophisticated trade networks, and their ability to thrive where others could not survive. Feel the gentle rhythm of historical understanding settling into your mind, like the soft cadence of hoofbeats on ancient grasslands. The Scythians, Zhongnu, and Mongols we have encountered were not merely raiders or traders, but human beings responding to environmental pressures with remarkable creativity. Their solutions, imperfect as they were, sustained civilizations across centuries and connected distant cultures through networks of exchange that enriched the entire Eurasian continent. The transformation of these societies over time reflects humanity's capacity for adaptation and growth. As environmental conditions changed, as new technologies emerged, as moral understanding evolved, these nomadic peoples gradually transformed their economic systems. The decline of traditional slave trading was not sudden collapse, but gentle evolution, like seasons changing across the steppes. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you contemplate the profound lesson embedded in this history, that human societies, however complex or contradictory, represent our species' endless attempts to find balance between survival and meaning, between individual needs and collective welfare. The nomadic peoples achieved this balance in their own unique way, creating stability through mobility, wealth through movement, and cultural exchange through economic networks that span continents. The legacy of these civilizations lives on in the peaceful coexistence of diverse peoples, in the quiet wisdom of adaptation, in the understanding that survival often requires difficult choices. Their story reminds us that judgment must be tempered with compassion, that understanding must precede condemnation, and that the human capacity for both creation and destruction often emerges from the same fundamental drive to survive and thrive. As you settle into deeper relaxation, imagine the vast steppes at twilight, painted in soft purples and golds. The wind moves gently through the grass, carrying with it the whispered stories of countless generations who found their way across these endless plains. Their struggles, their innovations had become part of the great human story of adaptation and survival. Feel yourself becoming one with this peaceful landscape, your breathing synchronized with the eternal rhythm of the grasslands. The complexities we have explored dissolve into understanding, the contradictions resolve into acceptance, and the harsh realities of historical survival transform into gentle wisdom about the human condition. Let the quiet wisdom of the steppes carry you into restful sleep, knowing that understanding these complex historical systems brings us closer to understanding ourselves, our capacity for both creation and adaptation, and our eternal quest to find meaning and security in an uncertain world. Rest now in the peaceful knowledge that human ingenuity, however imperfect, has always to survive, to connect, and to create meaning across the vast expanses of time and space.